Boogie in my head. I'm just a chubby in your head, son. You made me boogie in my head.
This is an age of disruption, of profound revolutionary change.
What we're really asking ministers is to empower the ambassadors.
The only thing that you really push forth is the truth.
You don't see many women represented when it comes to the decisions as to how to handle the pandemic.
Good afternoon. I'm Aoife White, and I'm the editor of Politico Europe's Technology and Competition News Service. You are watching Politico Live, the live extension of Politico's unbiased journalism, and we're coming to you today from Autoworld in the heart of Brussels. In a few minutes, we'll be welcoming the European Commission's Vice President for Values and Transparency, Věra Jourová, who usually lives up to her title by speaking very frankly and very openly. We need to hear some frank and open discussion on the challenges Europe faces with its digital goals as we reach the halfway point in the digital decade. We know the aims: to see more people, more companies, and more public services comfortably taking advantage of all the best the digital world can offer. We know the challenges: that networks need to be better, faster, safer, and more sustainable. This is a time to be frank about what's going well and what needs to be done better. The EU has been putting a vast amount of digital regulation on its books in the last few years that is now finally being enforced. We'll be hearing from European lawmakers about how well they see Europe on the path to the digital decade. But it's also a time to be open about how we address new challenges. Generative AI has exploded in the past year, and we'll talk about how policymakers are and should be tackling new risks and opportunities. We also have some older challenges still to tackle: the power of big tech over many parts of the digital economy. And we'll be talking about how the Digital Markets Act plans to set limits on some powerful tech giants. But first, some housekeeping remarks. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Qualcomm, for making this event possible. Thank you to all of you for listening here in this room and online. We love debate, and we'd like to make this event as interactive as possible. You can tweet or X us using @LivePolitico with the hashtag #EUDigitalTransformation. You can also ask questions through the Slido platform, also using the hashtag #EUDigitalTransformation. Please tell us who you are with your name and organization so we can be as transparent as possible for our viewers and panelists. We're just about ready to go. We'll now hear some opening remarks from our sponsor, Qualcomm's Senior Vice President and Head of Government Affairs for Europe, the Middle East and Africa, Wasim Chorbaji. Over to you, Wasim.
Thank you, Aoife. And I would like to thank Politico for bringing us together today for this important event. Important because we are in a journey of profound transformation, it has been said. A digital one, a digital transformation that's permeating all dimensions of our lives. In Europe, this transformation is guided by concrete targets, the so-called digital decade targets. They specify objectives when it comes to infrastructure, skills, digital transformation of industries, as well as public services. And it's no exaggeration to say that the way Europe will achieve those targets by 2030 will determine its future global role and geopolitical influence. So how is Europe doing halfway through the digital decade? That's the question that we are being asked today, and to which we'll try to bring some answers. I think we can look at this from 3 metrics: supply, demand, and ecosystems. Let me start with supply and talk about 3 critical components, 3 building blocks to the digital transformation: chips, infrastructure, and standards. First, chips. The EU Chips Act is actually a great success. We applaud its adoption. We are starting to see key investments in production, in design, in research and skills across Europe, all of which will help create a more resilient, more balanced, and more diversified global supply chain. And there is certainly more work to be done, and one of the panels will address this issue. But as we move forward, we should make sure that the investments that are made in all kinds of process nodes, from leading to mature, to cover the whole range of chips that will be needed in the future. Second, infrastructure. Here, Europe is unfortunately still trailing other countries in 5G rollout. Let me share 2 data points. Today, half of the world's 5G base stations are deployed in China. And 5G availability in the US is 4 to 5 times higher than in Europe. EU operators are facing today a significant investment challenge to meet the demand. This is down to high deployment cost coupled with low returns. So we need more investments in 5G, and we need more scale across the EU. That's why we support a telecoms New Deal, a New Deal that can change the existing market paradigm. We are therefore very encouraged to hear about a new Telecoms Act proposal by the Commission to be coming soon. We need this act, we desperately need it, to drive the much-needed investments into world-best infrastructure and change the way the market is structured today. Third, standards. 5G standardization competence is described around the world as a platform for technological sovereignty. Today, Europe holds a leading position, and it's a fact. This leadership should and can be maintained only and only if the incentives for companies to continue to invest in long-term R&D and shape standards globally are preserved. This is even more important as we are currently moving into 6G development, with initial global standardization to start as early as 2025. So we call on the European Parliament, the Council, and the Commission to really prioritize this objective when looking at the new proposed regulation on standard essential patents. Let me now move to demand, or in other words, technology adoption. And here I would like to take the case of AI that will be addressed also in one of the panels. It's clear that AI has quickly become one of the most significant technologies of our time. And with generative AI, we're witnessing an impressive level of innovation. The benefits for the digital transformation, and thus for the European digital decade, are significant. But there are also potential negative impacts, as we all know. So trust will be key to drive technology adoption. And trust in the technology by the users, whether these users are individuals, public services, or corporations. How can trust be built? Trust is built through technology designed by companies and rules set by governments, and usually both work hand in hand. On the regulatory front, the EU has taken the lead in developing the AI Act. We welcome the risk-based approach that has been pursued. Regulating the technology itself would have stifled innovation and reduced investments, critical investments in Europe. Global alignments on the rules, in the G7 in particular, even if complicated, would be helpful for the industry to have effective guardrails in place to continue to innovate safely. On the technology front, we as Qualcomm are committed to be working with industry partners and policymakers on a responsible AI. We are designing the technology in a way that will enable enhanced privacy and security, two key drivers for trust. We're integrating intelligence, including Gen AI models, on devices like cars, smartphones, computers, and industrial machines. Personal or proprietary enterprise information can then be treated locally and remain private and secure. This will enable greater opportunities for local innovation and drive customized use cases across ecosystems. And that leads me to my last point, ecosystems. Succeeding in the digital transformation requires companies to come together, to partner, to innovate, to interconnect, creating new ecosystems in so many sectors. Users win when those digital ecosystems are built on the foundation of openness. This is why the Digital Market Act, the DMA, was so much needed and is so important. Because buying a phone, a computer, or a car shouldn't lock a consumer into one ecosystem. Users should be able to freely choose their devices, their services, and their apps. Users should be able to communicate with each other, regardless of the devices they're using, the messaging app, or the mobile operator. This openness, which is based on interoperability and portability, has always been the foundation of telecommunication. We believe the DMA should uphold these principles. In particular, now that we're moving from a telecom-centric to a digital-driven world. Consumers are not expecting anything less when public services are digitized and industries are transformed. And the world is watching what's next, another important topic that will be addressed by the panels. And that's how the EU will enforce the DMA and how users will actually benefit in practice. Let me conclude by saying that it's really an exciting time to be part of this European Digital Decade journey, a very dynamic one, a journey that will change our lives in a way we understand now and in others we haven't yet imagined. In the coming few hours, we'll have the privilege of hearing from Vice President Jourová, leading members of the European Parliament, the European Commission, and key technology and policy experts. And I'm sure this conversation will be enlightening on where we stand now and what to expect in the future. Thank you for listening to me, and I hope you will enjoy a great event.
Hello, I'm Clothilde Goujard. I'm a tech reporter for POLITICO, and now we're going to move on to our interview with Vice President Věra Jourová. If you can come here. Thanks for being with us today. I don't think she needs an introduction, but let's still do it. Věra Jourová, you're Vice President for Value and Transparency, and pretty recently you've also taken over digital for Margrethe Vestager, who's on leave at the moment. So let's start right off. Margrethe Vestager is on leave. Maria Gabriel, Frans Timmermans have all left the Commission. Are you next to jump ship?
The last one will switch off, as we say. Of course, I'm ready to continue till the end. And it's not easy to continue after Margrethe Vestager. I wanted to say that I am using her shoes, but she would probably come today in Skechers. So yes, so we want to continue all the work, which also the Vice President described till the end of this commission, but also to, of course, prepare the ground for the continuation, because Digital Decade is the big strategy, important strategy, where the final countdown will be done in 2030. So, of course, there is a lot of work ahead of us, ahead of our followers. And my role before, when I was, it will sound strange, only the Vice President for Values and Transparency, was to push people into this agenda. I was always asking, where are the people? Where are the interests of each individual? And it was already my job during the promotion of the GDPR, because it was exactly the same story, that we wanted to give the power back to the hands of each individual.
So the EU agreed on a set of targets for 2030 last year, including doubling the number of unicorns, European unicorns, and such targets. We're almost at the end of 2023. Countries will now give in their first report. Do you genuinely believe that countries will manage to reach these very ambitious targets?
If I say I don't believe in it, it would either mean that the member states are not capable enough, or that we set the targets in a wrong way. Yeah? Imagine the logic behind that. No, I believe that if we push and if we cooperate, because this is mainly about cooperation, we might achieve the targets which are very demanding, because the strategy is very broad. It covers infrastructure, innovations, people, the general public, and the expert side. So I think that it is realistic, but we have to push hard and go quicker.
There's one target that I want to bring up, and that's 5G. So basically, you want all cities to have 5Gs by 2030. And so you have the industry, telecoms industry, that says they don't have enough funding. And then on top of that, the Commission has been pushing EU capitals to restrict or ban high-risk vendors of 5G components like Huawei or ZTE. So, can we have both? Can we have 5G in cities, populated areas in 2030, but also by saying, deal with this lack of funding and don't use these specific vendors?
I think these things are not in contradiction, because what we want is 5G which is secure, which is safe. So that's why we came with the toolkit for secure 5G, which we want the member states to follow. And as far as I remember the data, the facts from June this year, 23 member states adapted their legislation towards the goals in the toolkit, and only 10 are properly implementing it, so there is a gap still. And as for the financing, of course, we are looking into whether there is a fair business model in the EU and whether there will be enough funding for that. It's true that the EU is going to be the key investor in these technologies. When you look at how much we have in the recovery funding, it's the benchmark of 20% at least, which should go to digital technologies, and big part of it is the financing of infrastructure. Then you can see that we are leading this, but of course we also need the private sector and telecommunications to come along.
You mentioned a fair business model. There's been a debate in Brussels for quite a few months, even longer than that actually, about telecom companies saying online platforms should contribute through a levy. What do you think about this idea now that you're this new vice president on?
Yeah, I will repeat what Margaret said several months ago, that we need to have the facts right and the data. And that's why I am now waiting for the study, which I think should be already completed, where we will see the fresh data, who pays what, and how much the telecommunications need, and whether it's the fair distribution of the funding or of the finance. So we will consider the way forward.
So what's the timeline for this study and for?
Well, you can imagine this commission has a very short timeline for everything. So we are now going to look into that and work on it so that we are able to propose something.
Before the end of the mandate?
Well, I hope so.
All right.
But as I said, we are now looking at the data.
Okay. Let's move on to another hot topic, and that's generative AI. Technology has lots of promises, including to accelerate to make vaccines and medicine in general, but also some risks for disinformation or cyber attacks. You're meeting tomorrow with executive of OpenAI, the US company behind ChatGPT that was banned at one point in Italy because of GDPR infringements, and there's different ongoing investigations around that. They're also behind a generated image tool, DALL-E, the sort of tools that can potentially also be used or misused by some actors. What do you want to tell them? What's on the agenda?
Well, I want to hear from the visitor how they want to guarantee the safety of the technology. because, as you know, I wanted the technological developers to, once they develop the AI new tools, at the same time to develop the tools which will minimize the risks. So I think that the discussion will be about the risks, and also I think I will have an opportunity to describe how we understand risk and how we also categorize the risks in the AI Act, which is in a mature stage of negotiations now in the trialogue. So we will compare notes, and I will. It's always fascinating to listen to the managers of big tech, because they are always coming with new things. And what I always ask them, okay, maybe they might be good for people, but how are you ready to mitigate the risks which might come along?
Have you yourself tried ChatGPT and trying to with your name to see what it was saying?
I didn't dare to do that.
No, haven't checked if there's any misinformation about you out there.
Well, you know, I cancelled my Facebook account some time ago, and I did it as a demonstration of I don't agree with that. This is full of hatred and violence, and if I cancel my Facebook account, there will be less violence in Europe. But no, I didn't try it. But I think that it might be useful. But again, we have to address it in the legislation. And with the generative AI, this is such a fascinating illustration how fast the technologies go and how slow the legislative process is. And this is not a criticism, it was always the same thing, that money first, technologies, and law. And we were always catching up in preparing the rules for the world of technologies. But here, the generative AI caught us still in the middle of the work on the AI Act, so now there is a window of opportunity for us still in the trialogue phase to add the chapter which will cover the generative AI.
You actually, back in June, asked for some of these company generating AI-boosted text or images to label their content as part of the code of practice of disinformation. Have any of these companies followed through? Is it going fast enough?
What I wanted was to create the task force or some expert group which will work on the feasible, technological feasible and still purposeful solution. And my plea was very simple. When the people read or see the machine production, they should know that this is machine production, that this is not the result of the creativity and work of real people. Here comes my fundamental rights agenda, that I believe that we should not give the AI tools the same rights which the people have. We have developed a battery of broad spectrum of human rights for the human beings. So now I think we should be very vigilant and not to give the same rights to the machines, because then we might at some moment start losing the competition. Does it sound dystopic? It is a bit. But no, my plea was very simple. We want the people to understand that what they read is the production of AI, and to be aware of it, and then to make a choice, for instance, whether to believe it or not. And you know, I also, it was said within the discussion on how to more efficiently fight against disinformation. And for me, the biggest nightmare is when disinformation is using, or the disinformers, those who are organizing the campaigns, are using the AI tools, especially in pre-electoral campaigns.
Do you have any fears for the EU elections that such tools could be used? And will we be ready enough to make sure they're not used to disrupt elections?
Well, I will give you a little portion of optimism. I think that with Digital Services Act, we are better equipped against the strong and manipulative campaigning. We have this week elections in Slovakia, soon elections in Poland, so we will see whether there is already some change visible in the way how the platforms are functioning. I never wanted the platforms like Facebook and Google to moderate the political debate in the EU. Rather, on the contrary, I was always telling them, do not push your nose into the political matters in the EU. But at the same time, we see so many very dangerous trends, especially, as I said, the combination of well-targeted and well-designed massive disinformation campaigns during the electoral time that we need to be able to counter that. But not by censorship, but rather by the fact-checking and invitation of the broad society to take care of the facts, including the independent media. So we really want the whole of society approach, which is, I think, very typical feature of the Code of Practice against disinformation.
With the Code of Practice, the new results are actually coming out tomorrow as to how platforms and other signatories have been doing. Can you tell us a bit more about what it seems like has happened in the last 6 months?
My expectations already were before the first deadline or first moment of getting the first report was that we will be able to use the data from the signatories so that to do a proper analysis on where we are with impact of disinformation on the society. And for me to get the data from Google and other signatories, and I'm happy they are in, you know, Twitter left, but we have all the big players on board. So for me, it's important to see how many fake accounts they suspended or how much money was stopped for the traditional disinformation channels. But for me, what's important is to be able to measure the impact on the society and whether what we are doing, whether it has some positive impact or what's the trend, how, of course, also how the Russian propaganda is gaining ground, whether they are successful, because we are in an information war. So it's the first thing, whether we will get high-quality data which will enable us to read more about the reality and about the trend. The second thing is, I am repeating again and again that we don't have only 3 or 4 dominant languages in the EU. We have 24. And especially the smaller languages, Central and Eastern European languages, they have been neglected horribly in the past. And paradoxically, maybe not paradoxically, but it's a bad coincidence that especially these languages and these countries are under intense pressure from Russia now. So we want the signatories to act in all the languages in the same way.
There is one platform that is known to carry misinformation and disinformation, and that's Telegram. Telegram is not in the Code of Practice of Disinformation and has not been designated as a very large online platform under the GSA, meaning, you know, it doesn't have that many obligations to follow in terms of countering disinformation. What's next? What is the Commission planning to do with that?
Well, I would like to have Telegram on board, but obviously there is no appetite from Telegram side. So we have to accept that they are doing what they are doing. Sometimes I have to say that Telegram is also the source of objective information, especially from the Ukrainian battlefield and from Russia. So it's a mixture of disinformation, but also of the information which we might trust because there is a double check from the independent media. So what can we do? We cannot do much. Of course, the invitation to the code of practice still is valid, but I don't see any signs.
And on the DSA, you don't have the numbers to designate the platform?
Well, in case they have more than 45 million users in the EU, which obviously they don't, then we will of course designate them.
Okay, all right.
But there are also obligations for smaller ones.
Right.
Yeah, so they are not off the hook in the EU.
Yeah. On the DSA, it came into force for very large online platforms and search engines just a month ago. When can we expect the first investigations?
I cannot tell you. The investigation is purely independent.
So you have no idea?
I have many ideas.
But that you cannot share with us.
But as the moderator at the beginning said that I always am so open that sometimes there are some troubles afterwards. So I think that the experts we have now in the Commission, and we are completing the team, of course I think they are focusing on those who can really do big harm and who might be the first ones. But I remember very well when we started with GDPR, we could not say that the small ones are safe and the big ones are dangerous. Yeah? So, of course, there will be own findings, there will be notifications coming to the Commission, and so the professionals will do their job independently.
To go back to AI and the international forum, the EU is working on its own law, but it's part of a global discussion around the world, and there's some push to establish different mechanisms of global governance. And one of the countries leading that push is the United Kingdom, the UK, with its AI summit in November. Will you be going?
We are considering. We have received an invitation, which might mean that some representative of the Commission will go, but which level and who concretely, we have to decide still.
All right. Could that be you or someone else?
I love London. Is it in London?
It is.
I am a former guide to London. I took many Czech tourists there, so I might even be sentimental there, which might not be a good mood for the negotiations.
Sounds good. China is also at the center of this discussion, also because, you're just back from Beijing for the EU-China digital dialogue, and Beijing has also been invited, China has been invited by the UK for its AI summit. Do you agree with that? Do you think China, even though it's been using AI for fairly repressive measures like surveilling its population and its minority, a Uyghur minority, do you think it should still be part of the global governance on AI?
I had to answer this question to myself before I go into Beijing. I am not a former guide to Beijing, so it was not, the feelings were different. But I believe that President Ursula von der Leyen was very clear and is right that we have to keep the channels open. Of course, we insist that we are mainly rivals in this world of digital technologies. We have totally different concept. Our concept of human rights differs extremely much from the concept which is applied by the Chinese state. But still, it's better to speak to each other, and it's better to understand where they are going. So that's why I also wanted to go to China and speak to the relevant people there to understand better. And I think it's the same goal which the organizers of the UK summit have in mind.
So you would have invited China as well if you'd done this summit?
I am not organizing such summit.
But if you were to organize one for the EU?
Well, we are not organizing that, and at the same time we are really intensively focusing on G7 work instead of this global endeavor. If going global, I believe that the United Nations are a good address to do that, to organize some global effort to agree on the global AI principles. For G7, the work is rather advanced. We are working on the code of conduct for AI, which should be accompanied by the principles for AI. One of the strands of work is more focused on the technological innovators or for them, and the other is more societal thing. And as I said, we are quite advanced. We have very good common understanding on what should be under the ethics standards for AI. I should go to Kyoto at the beginning of October, where we could continue the discussion on AI principles and several other things.
There's many different discussions and codes of conduct, of practice, of on initiatives around AI around the world. Who's really leading the discussion? Who's pushing forward their vision of AI?
I believe that it's the EU which is advanced. We already in 2018, we had the first ethics standards, and we had the luxury of being able to wait for the proper moment to design the hard legislation. Why? Because we already had GDPR, and protection of privacy of individual people, it's a big pillar or essential pillar of everything we do on AI. So we started soon. I think that for generally speaking, when it comes to digital technologies and AI, in Europe we have the right instincts to, at least for regulation. Because we really try hard to come with the rules which are meaningful, which are proportionate, which will not kill innovations, which will be technologically feasible, and which will also address what the Vice President said, the need to keep the trust of people. And I would, speaking about the people, I would add the understanding of people what's going on.
You say you're trying to not kill innovation either, but all of the large language models, all the big AI innovations everyone's raving about, none of them seem to be coming from the EU. Instead, what we're seeing is Google that has to delay the launch of its own AI chatbot Bard because of all these regulations, and some smaller companies, I'm assuming, that are trying to figure out how to make it sure that they won't get a major privacy fine. How do you make sure that innovation in Europe is not hindered?
Well, I spoke to big people from the big ones, so with all the key managers of all the key big tech, and none of them told me we will not deliver some technologies in the EU. They just know that it might be under stricter supervision, and that the rules and the obligations will be higher than somewhere else. But they cannot just skip the EU because it's a huge market where they make big money.
We're reaching the end of our time, but I still want you to talk a little bit more about a topic that's close to you, I think, is the European Media Freedom Act. And recently, last week, the French police arrested and detained for about almost 2 days a journalist who'd reported on leaked document about a joint French and Egyptian spy operation. Could the French law enforcement do this under the European Media Freedom Act?
Uneasy to say, because I don't know the details of the case, and we never make comments on ongoing investigations. But I will give you the answer regarding the Media Freedom Act, because we wanted to protect the journalists against spying, against the use of interception and tools like Pegasus or Predator. We are prohibiting in the Media Freedom Act the push from the states for disclosing the information sources. So I think that I will say after, not in case of, after the Media Freedom Act will be in force, I hope in a good shape, the negotiations are starting now, then the journalists will be much better protected against these pressures from the state.
Very last question. You've already had 2 mandates with the European Commission. Is there a third one for you?
Who said it? Enough is enough.
So it's a no.
A no.
That's no. Going back to Czech politics.
I don't know yet. You know, after 10 years, maybe one could have some kind of political detox, just to remain normal.
Well, seems like we're running out of time. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today out of your busy schedule. So it's Věra Jourová, Vice President for the European Commission. Thank you to all of us. You will now have a fireside chat about insights from the European Parliament, 5 years on the path to digital decade with my great colleague, cybersecurity reporter, Antoinetta Russi. Thank you to all of you.